Elden Ring Nightreign's characters each specialize in a specific class of weapons. Wylder has greatswords, Guardian gets halberds, and so on. The typical player will try to build for these weapons and use them as much as possible on their respective characters. But what if I told you that you can use other weapons too? Hi everyone, my name's DIABETOR, and today I'm going to tell you alternative weapon choices for your chosen nightfarer and give you reasons to use them and tips to get the most out of them. If you find this video helpful, please leave a like, share the video, and consider subscribing. It really helps me out. It's easy to fall into the mindset that you're doing something wrong if you don't make use of your character's weapon specialty, but there are plenty of good reasons to keep alternatives available. The first and simplest is just to have access to a different moveset. The nightfarers each have unique movesets for their preferred weapon type, and for being honest, most of them fucking suck. Wylder's greatsword swings can be inconsistent against smaller enemies, Raider's charged heavy attacks are slow as fuck, Duchess's running heavy attack is basically useless, Guardian's halberd moveset does mostly pierce damage, which is great, until you run into an enemy who's resistant to pierce and his already poor damage output plummets. And the same goes for ironeye, who also really can't deal with blocking enemies unless he gets up close to them, which defeats the entire point of having a ranged weapon. Having access to one or two other movesets will make up for the shortcomings your chosen character's unique moveset has, which can be a game changer when it comes to fighting certain bosses, and will also allow you to make use of more weapon passives, passive buffs, and talisman effects. Raider's ultra-slow charged heavy attacks, for example, are really impractical in most circumstances. Weapon passives like damage negation up after landing a charge attack are really useful, especially now in Deep of Throat Night mode, and it's a shame that they're such a pain in the ass to make use of with his lackadaisical charged heavies. But if you deviate from his specialization and get something like a colossal sword, greatsword, or great spear, then you can take advantage of his high damage with strength weapons, high poise, which combines with the hyper armor of these large weapons, and the power of charged heavy attacks much more effectively. Certain bosses, like the bell-bearing hunter, punish you for staying at range. The hunter's magic flying sword bullshit forces you to either stay at long or close range and fucks you up if you even think about moving to medium range. Having a fast weapon like a thrusting sword, claws, or fist weapon makes it a lot less painful to fight these guys because their fast speed, low stamina consumption, and quick recovery times make it easy to fight in a dodge-hit-dodge style, and as long as you don't get greedy, they make these guys trivially easy. Really, I consider thrusting swords, claws, and fist weapons to be universal tools that you should always keep an eye out for, regardless of who you're playing as. While these weapon classes are biased towards dex characters like ironeye and executor, each nightfarer can make good use of them because they're just such solid weapon types with good properties. Thrusting swords are fast as hell and do pierce damage, making them great for safely poking enemies to death or using them as a fast offhand option for finishing off weakened enemies. Claws are fast and do bleed buildup, with the exception of the venomous fang, really quickly, so they're great for getting a couple quick bleed procs off on an enemy to soften them up at the start of a fight. Depending on the enemy, it can be really helpful to hit them with a couple bleed procs that chunk their health, and then switch back to your primary weapon to finish them off. Claws are also great for quickly shredding trash mobs like soldiers, bats, and wolves without getting locked into long attack animations that your other weapons might have. Finally, fist weapons like the Iron Ball and Star Fist are amazing for their very high poise damage per second, making them an excellent tool for getting poise breaks. Combine them with throwing daggers, which are useful for preventing an enemy's poise from regenerating if it dodges away from you, and you can consistently break the stances of everything you run into, setting them up for crits and giving your team valuable time to breathe. Beyond movesets, having access to different damage types can make a huge difference. Most enemies are reasonably vulnerable to pretty much any damage type, be it physical or elemental, so any weapon works just fine for most of the expedition. Until you run into something like the Mountaintop Ice Dragon, who's pretty resistant to most damage types, and then the game is suddenly a miserable slog. However, all it takes is the foresight to grab a strike weapon of some kind, like a hammer or great hammer, and regardless of who you're playing as, that fucker suddenly becomes a lot more manageable. Strike damage is also great for dealing with enemies like skeletons, imps, watchdogs, and the Smelter Demon, and more importantly the Night Lords, only one of whom, the Augur, is resistant to strike damage, and most are weak to it. Slash damage also comes in handy quite often. Most trash mobs like soldiers and demi-humans, pretty much every animal like red wolves, lions, and bears, most of the castle basement bosses, trolls, Albanians, just about everything that isn't wearing armor like wormfaces and mages, a whole bunch of common enemies are weak to slash damage. If you're a strength-leaning character like Wylder, Raider, or Guardian, then any curved greatsword is good to fill in this role. And for the rest of the crew, curved swords, daggers, and claws work just fine too. So now you're probably wondering, how do I know if a given weapon is good for my specific character? We can't see the numbers for the different Nightfarer stats in-game, but their entries in the visual codex give a rough approximation of their stat spread, and data miners like Zully the Witch and Slay have resources which detail them. If you want to see the different character stats, then check out the miscellaneous datasheet linked down in the description. Now, this kind of specific technical info isn't really something most people need or want to memorize, but it is nice to get a general idea of the actual numbers your preferred classes are working with. Something much more practical for the typical player, myself included, is Online Bettor's weapon scaling sheet, also linked in the description. This sheet is great for getting a good idea of which weapons scale best with your character's stats, and also for seeing which weapon classes work best with each character. You'll need to make a copy of the sheet to use these sorting options. Then you can use the filters at the top of each column to sort weapons based on 3 different metrics. 1. Attack power by character. This is actually the least practical sorting metric here, because it's generally going to put colossal weapons and other huge weapons on top, which will pretty much always have the highest attack power because that's the point of the class, but attack power isn't everything, so that doesn't necessarily mean that it's good for the character you're playing as. And again, it's also impractical to try and memorize 24 different weapons with specific numbers for their high attack power under specific conditions without considering buffs, passive, relic effects, or scaling modifiers like those listed at the top of the sheet. So this is mostly like a curiosity-based thing if you ask me. 2. Scaling by character. This is a much more useful metric, which Bettors was gracious enough to include for us mere mortals. This gives you a much better idea of which weapons work with your character's specific stats, which not only helps you identify good choices for your character, but also gives you good info about which weapons you should give to your teammates. For example, once I saw a Raider using Rivers of Blood on a team with 2 executors. Had he known about this sheet, he would have realized that Rivers, while a solid weapon, is much more effective in the hands of an executor, and he would have given it to me instead, 3. Attack power by weapon class. This is probably the most useful metric for the typical player. Sort the sheet like this, and you can see how each Nightfarer performs with weapons in specific categories. This makes it really easy to see that, for example, Executor loves katanas, but he also excels with daggers, curved swords, and thrusting swords. Or that Raider can make good use of great spears and halberds, but you want to avoid the tree spear or the guardian sword spear because they're more faith or dex oriented respectively. I think the average player will get the best results if they look at this sheet sorted in this order, highlight the attack power column for their character, and then scroll down the list and make a mental note of which weapon classes work for their preferred character. Like, as Guardian, I know I should keep an eye out for halberds, great axes, and great hammers. Or, if we look a little more closely, we'll see that he also likes any weapon with faith scaling because he's got faith to work with in addition to his strength and dex, which also means that if I were to loot a place such as a sacred camp or ruin, then I could get weapons that have the holy affinity and will scale better with his stats because he has faith scaling. Alternatively, if I'm playing as, say, Raider, and I'm shopping for a colossal sword, I can see that the Troll Knight sword and Royal Greatsword aren't quite as optimal for him compared to most of the other options, which makes sense because those swords have intelligence scaling and he's, kinda dumb. I'm gonna call that the end of this guide. Hopefully, I've enlightened you to the wonders of having a varied arsenal for your chosen Nightfarer and given you the tools to figure out what works for you based on your character, playstyle, the boss you're fighting, etc. Try to think about how your character's kit synergizes with different weapon classes for the best results. If you have any suggestions for stuff I missed, or you want to argue with me, then comment below. And if you found this video helpful, please leave a like, share the video, and consider subscribing. It really helps me out. My name is DIABETOR, and I will catch you later.